I thought everyone wanted my authentic, unvarnished views. Hillary Clinton walks back her refusal to back Bernie Sanders if he wins 2020 nomination after accusing him of sexism. Bernie Sanders mocked Hillary Clinton's claim that nobody likes him. On a good day, my wife likes me, he told reporters on Capitol Hill. Clinton unloaded on Sanders in new interview. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. He was a career politician. It's all just baloney, she said in documentary on her life, and she blasted the culture around Sanders and the antics of his supporters in an interview with The Hollywood Reporter. It's his online Bernie bros and their relentless attacks on lots of his competitors, particularly the women. Clinton said Clinton was promoting a documentary about her life. Hillary's 4-hour documentary will air on Hulu in March. She will be at Sundance later this month to promote it by Emily Gooden, senior use political reporter for DailyMail.com, published 2:13 Greenwich Mean Time, the 22nd of January 2020, updated 2:14 Greenwich Mean Time, the 22nd of January 2020. Hillary Clinton tried to calm a growing storm over the Democratic 2020 nomination late Tuesday by saying she would support Bernie Sanders if he won, after attacking him as enabling sexism and refusing to commit to endorsing him. I thought everyone wanted my authentic, unvarnished views. But to be serious, the number one priority for our country and world is retiring Trump, and, as I always have, I will do whatever I can to support our nominee, she tweeted. Clinton set off the storm when she spoke with The Hollywood Reporter to promote Hillary, a documentary of her marriage and political life that will air on Hulu. She addresses Sanders in the documentary, saying, "He was in Congress for years. He had one senator support him. Nobody likes him. Nobody wants to work with him. He got nothing done. He was a career politician. It's all just baloney and I feel so bad that people got sucked into it." Her attack reflects not just her feelings about the 2016 race, but also concern among centrist Democrats that Sanders has a realistic shot of winning the 2020 nomination. She told The Hollywood Reporter her assessment of Sanders still holds, and she wouldn't answer whether or not she will endorse him in the 2020 contest. "I'm not going to go there yet," she said. "We're still in a very vigorous primary season. I will say, however, that it's not only him, it's the culture around him. It's his leadership team. It's his prominent supporters. On a good day, my wife likes me." Bernie Sanders tried to defuse the attack from Hillary Clinton, which reflects not just her feelings about the 2016 race, but also concern among centrist Democrats that Sanders has a realistic shot of winning the 2020 nomination. Hillary Clinton unloaded on Bernie Sanders in new interview. She went on to blast his supporters, known as Bernie Bros, for their attacks on women. It's his online Bernie Bros and their relentless attacks on lots of his competitors, particularly the women, Clinton said. "And I really hope people are paying attention to that, because it should be worrisome that he has permitted this culture. Not only permitted, he seems to really be very much supporting it." Sanders himself tried to avoid the row. "On a good day, my wife likes me," he told reporters on Capitol Hill. Sanders was responding to comments Clinton made in a new interview, where she unloaded on the Vermont senator, in a clear sign the rift from the last presidential contest has not healed. "Secretary Clinton is entitled to her point of view," he said. And asked why the former Secretary of State was still talking about 2016, Sanders responded, "That is a good question. Ask her." Sanders staying in the 2016 contest after it was clear Clinton would be the nominee, along with his attacks on her and his reluctance to endorse, resulted in many Democrats believing he damaged her candidacy as she went into the general election against Donald Trump. Sanders faced complaints from women who worked on his 2016 campaign that they were harassed by male colleagues and paid less than their male counterparts. He apologized and vowed to do better in 2020. In his response to Clinton's comments, Sanders said he was focused on Trump's impeachment trial that begins Tuesday in the Senate. "My focus today is on a monumental moment in American history, the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Together, we are going to go forward and defeat the most dangerous president in American history," he said in a statement. Clinton also addressed the feud between Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, calling it part of the Vermont senator's pattern of behavior. Warren claims Sanders told her in a private meeting a woman cannot be president, which he has denied. "This argument about whether or not or when he did or didn't say that a woman couldn't be elected, it's part of a pattern," Clinton said. If it were a one-off, you might say, okay, fine, but he said I was unqualified. I had a lot more experience than he did, and got a lot more done than he had, but that was his attack on me. I just think people need to pay attention, because we want, hopefully, to elect a president who's going to try to bring us together, and not either turn a blind eye, or actually reward the kind of insulting, attacking, demeaning, degrading behavior that we've seen from this current administration. She said she has spoken to both Warren and Amy Klobuchar, the two women left in the Democratic race, to give them advice. With the women, I say, you're probably not going to be treated fairly, but don't let it knock you off stride, she said. She also addressed her past work with Harvey Weinstein, who raised money for her political campaigns. Her interview indicates bitterness left from the 2016 campaign. The two are seen above on the campaign trail in 2015 has not healed. How could we have known? He raised money for me, for the Obamas, for Democrats in general. And that at the time was something that everybody thought made sense. And of course, if all of us had known what we know now, it would have affected our behavior, she said. She also said she was the victim of a double standard when it came to women, who criticized her for staying with Bill Clinton after the Monica Lewinsky affair but continued to support him. I wish I understood it, I really do. And look, I lived through that, where women were judging me and then a little conversation would lead to the fact that they had a similar issue, or their sister did, or their friend did, and there was so much anxiety and even fear wrapped up in it. But it was also true that, as we said in survey after survey, he could, if he ran today, get re-elected. What is it about this double standard, both double standard in public and double standard in private, she said. And she ruled out running for president again. I have had so many people urge me to. Every day. And I'm grateful for people's confidence, but I did think it was right for me to step back. I'll do anything I can to defeat the current incumbent, and to reverse a lot of his damaging policies. Thankfully, I still have a voice and a following, Clinton said. The 4-hour Hillary will premiere in its entirety March 6 on Hulu. Clinton also will promote it at the Sundance Film Festival later this month. Everyone and everything Hillary Clinton has blamed for losing the election, 44 and counting. James Comey. Clinton is furious that Comey, then the FBI director, publicly revealed the reopening of the secret email server investigation just before Election Day, and has said so time after time after time. The FBI, Comey's entire organization, does not escape her wrath. The FBI wasn't the Federal Bureau of Ifs or innuendos. Its job was to find out the facts, she writes in What Happened. Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt in my mind that Putin wanted me to lose and wanted Trump to win, she told USA Today in September last year while promoting What Happened. It was hardly a new theme. As early as December, the New York Times obtained audio in which she told her donors, Putin publicly blamed me for the outpouring of outrage by his own people, and that is the direct line between what he said back then and what he did in this election. The Russians' Putin's entire apparatus gets a name check. In May, she told the CodeCon convention how 1,000 Russian agents had filled Facebook with fake news. She told NPR, my path toward November was being disrupted with Russians. WikiLeaks, the transparency website, is consistently ranked along with Comey by Clinton at the top of her blame list. She told NPR, unfortunately the Comey letter, aided to great measure by the Russian WikiLeaks, raised all those doubts again, and she writes of its founder Julian Assange in What Happened. In my view, Assange is a hypocrite who deserves to be held accountable for his actions. Low information vote. As you put yourself in the position of a low information voter, and all of it said on your Facebook feed, your Twitter account is saying, oh my gosh, Hillary Clinton is running a child trafficking operation in Washington with John Podesta, she told the CodeCon convention in May. Well, you don't believe it, but this has been such an unbelievable election, you kind of go, oh maybe I better look into that. The Electoral College. We have an Electoral College problem. It's an anachronism, she told Vox. Anti-American forces. You think it's important that we learn the real lessons from this last campaign, because the forces that we are up against are not just interested in influencing our elections and our politics, they're going after our economy and they're going after our unity as a nation, she told CodeCon in May. What is hard for people to really accept, although now after the election there's greater understanding, is that there are forces in our country, put the Russians to one side, who have been fighting rearguard actions for as long as I've been alive because my life coincided with the civil rights movement, with the women's rights movement, with anti-war protesting, with the impeachment. Everyone WHO assumed she would win. He was the victim of a very broad assumption that I was going to win, she told the CodeCon convention. Bad polling numbers. Clinton says polls in key states did not serve her. I think polling is going to have to undergo some revisions in how they actually measure people, she told the CodeCon convention, how they reach people. The best assessments as of right now are that the polling was not that inaccurate, but it was predominantly national polling and I won nationally. Barack Obama. Clinton has two beefs with Obama, one of them being that he won 2 terms. Clinton says that succeeding an incumbent is almost impossible for a Democrat. No non-incumbent Democrat had run successfully to succeed another 2-termer since Vice President Martin Van Buren won in 1836, she writes in What Happened. But she also says his response to the Russian campaign of interference wasn't enough. I do wonder sometimes about what would have happened if President Obama had made a televised address to the nation in the fall of 2016 warning that our democracy was under attack, she writes in What Happened. White women believe absent Comey, I might have picked up 1 or 2 points among white women, she told Vox in September. White women are really quite politically dependent on their view of their own security and their own position in society, what works and doesn't work for them. What happened in my election is I was on the way to winning white women until former director of the FBI Jim Comey dropped that very ill-advised letter on October the 28th and my numbers just went down, she said in a March 2018 speech in India. All of a sudden, white women who were going to vote for me, and frankly, standing up to the men in their lives and the men in their workplaces, were being told, she's going to jail, you don't want to vote for her. It's going to be terrible, you can't vote for that. It stopped my momentum and it decreased my vote enough. Because I was ahead and I was winning and I thought I had fought my way back. The New York Times. The newspaper was blamed as early as May at the CodeCon conference in Rancho Palos Verde, California. She singled out its managing editor, Dean Baquet, the paper's most senior editor, instead of coverage of her email issue under his direction. They covered it like it was Pearl Harbor. Joe Biden could have run against her and didn't. But Clinton writes, Joe Biden said the Democratic Party in 2016 did not talk about what it always stood for, and that was how to maintain a burgeoning middle class. I find this fairly remarkable, considering that Joe himself campaigned for me all over the Midwest and talked plenty about the middle class. Bernie Sanders has hacks caused lasting damage, making it harder to unify progressives in the general election and paving the way for Trump's crooked Hillary campaign, she writes in What Happened. I don't know if that bothered Bernie or not. Bernie Bros. Some of his supporters, the so-called Bernie Bros, took to harassing my supporters online. It got ugly and more than a little sexist, she writes in What Happened. People wanting change. He thought, at end of day, people would say, look, we do want change, and we want the right kind of change, and we want change that is realistic and is going to make difference in my life and my family's life and my paycheck, she told Vox. That's what I was offering. And I didn't in any way want to feed into this, not just radical political argument that was being made on other side, but very negative cultural argument about who we are as Americans. Misogynists asked by CNN's Christina Amanpour at the Women for Women International event in New York in May if misogyny was to blame, she said, yes, I do think it played a role. Television executives. When you have a presidential campaign and the total number of minutes on TV news, which is still how most people get their information, covering all of our policies, climate change, anything else was 32 minutes. I don't blame voters, she told The View. They don't get a broad base of information to make decision on. The more outrageous you are, the more inflammatory you are, the higher the ratings are. NETFLIX. Hillary does not do Netflix and chill, or if she does, she doesn't find it very relaxing. 8 of the top 10 political documentaries on Netflix were screeds against President Obama and me, she claimed at the CodeCon convention. Facebook. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages, she told Codecon. Twitter, usually mentioned in the same breath as Facebook, the micro-blogging site is seen by Clinton as one of the reasons for her loss. She told the Codecon convention in May that Trump had a method in his tweets: "They want to influence your reality. That to me is what we're up against, and we can't let that go unanswered," she said. Content farms in Macedonia through content farms, through an enormous investment in falsehoods, fake news, call it what you will, lies. That's a good word too. The other side was using content that was flat out false, she told the Codecon convention in May. They were conveying this weaponized information and the content of it, and they were running, there's all these stories about and I've seen them now, and you sit there and it looks like sort of low-level CNN operation, or a fake newspaper, campaign finance. You had Citizens United come to its full fruition, she told Codecon in May, so unaccountable money flowing in against me, against other Democrats, in a way that we hadn't seen, and then attached to this weaponized information war. Media, American journalists who eagerly and uncritically repeated whatever WikiLeaks dished out during the campaign could learn from the responsible way the French press handled the hack of Macron. She writes in What Happened Now. President Macron had a massive tranche of his emails hacked and released shortly before the French voted. Many outlets did not report on their contents. Steve Bannon and Breitbart provided the untrue stories, she told the Codecon convention in May. The Democratic Party, I set up my campaign and we have our own data operation. I get the nomination. So I'm now the nominee of the Democratic Party. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party, Clinton told the Codecon convention in May. I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong. I had to inject money into the Republican Party. The Republicans were far better prepared for a campaign than the Democrats, she claimed, when it came to money and data, telling the Codecon convention. So Trump becomes the nominee and he is basically handed this tried and true, effective foundation, Cambridge Analytica, the data targeting firm ultimately owned by Robert Mercer, the billionaire Breitbart backer, and his family, is said to have targeted voters to drive them away from Clinton. They ultimately added something, and I think again we'd better understand that. The Mercers did not invest all that money for their own amusement, she told the Codecon convention. Women protesters. The massive demonstrations in Washington and other cities in the wake of the election were organized as an immediate response to Clinton's shock defeat. But that did not stop Clinton from writing in What Happened. I couldn't help but ask where those feelings of solidarity, outrage and passion had been during the election. Matt Lauer, the NBC Today Show anchor, quizzed both candidates at a Commander-in-Chief forum on board Intrepid in New York, but Clinton, who went first in the back-to-back interviews, complained about Lauer focusing on her secret server and whether it raised questions over her trustworthiness. Lauer had turned what should have been a serious discussion into a pointless ambush. What waste of time, she writes in What Happened. She later delighted in his firing for sexual misconduct, saying in December, "Every day I believe more in karma." White voters have been fleeing the Democratic Party ever since Lyndon Johnson predicted they would, she told Vox. Democratic documentary makers, we're not making the documentaries that we're going to get onto Netflix, she told Codecon. She was asked by the interviewer, "This is because Hollywood isn't liberal enough." "No, it's because Democrats aren't putting their money there," she replied. Benghazi investigators. The attacks on the U.S. diplomatic compound in the Libyan city of Benghazi on September 11, 2012, happened when Clinton was Secretary of State. It claimed 4 American lives, and was the focus of intense investigation by Congress. Clinton told the Today Show, "Take the Benghazi tragedy, I have one of the top Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, admitting we're going to take that tragedy, because, we've lost people, unfortunately, going back to the Reagan administration. If you talk about recent times, in diplomatic attacks, but boy, it was turned into a political football." And it was aimed at undermining my credibility, my record, my accomplishments. Voter suppression. Suppressing her voters was named by Clinton as one of the major factors in her defeat. In her interview on the Today Show, when she rattled off her laundry list, "What was at work here?" she said, "In addition to the mistakes that I made, which I recount in the book, what about endemic sexism and misogyny, not just in politics, but in our society? What about the unprecedented action of the FBI director? What about the interference of an adversary nation? What about voter suppression?" It was a return to a theme. She suggested it was a problem in Wisconsin. In an interview in May with New York Magazine, "I would have won had I not been subjected to the unprecedented attacks by Comey and the Russians, aided and abetted by the suppression of the vote, particularly in Wisconsin," she said. Republicans learned that if you suppress votes you win. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is accused of stopping the Obama administration from revealing what Clinton says the Russians were up to, helping tip the balance against her because he did not want a third successive Democratic term in the White House. Mitch McConnell, in what I think of as a not only unpatriotic but despicable act of partisan politics, made it clear that if the Obama administration spoke publicly about what they knew on Russia, he would accuse them of partisan politics, of trying to tip the balance toward me, she told The New Yorker. The Supreme Court. Clinton claims the Supreme Court watered down the Voting Rights Act at the CODCON convention. "You had effective suppression of votes," she said. "I was in the Senate when we voted 98-0 under a Republican president, George W. Bush, to extend the Voting Rights Act, and the Supreme Court says, oh, we don't need it anymore, throws it out, and Republican governors and legislatures began doing everything they could to suppress the votes." Clinton appears to be referring to Section 4(b) of the act being ruled unconstitutional by the court in 2013, because it relied on out-of-date data, which meant it was not in line with the 15th Amendment. Fathers, husbands, boyfriends, and male bosses. Clinton says that James Comey's actions in reopening the FBI investigation allowed men to influence their wives or girlfriends. "Women will have no empathy for you because they will be under tremendous pressure, and I'm talking principally about white women. They will be under tremendous pressure from fathers, and husbands, and boyfriends and male employers, not to vote for the girl," she told NPR. The invisible state named by her confidant Lanny Davis as the reason she lost at a reading of his book, while Hillary nodded along in approval. Pizzagate. The claim that members of the Democratic Party and particularly the Clinton campaign were running a pedophile child trafficking ring out of the basement of a Washington, D.C. pizza restaurant first surfaced before the 2016 election, she told an address to a women-only club in New York in April 2018. "It spread like wildfire. You look at that and think, that's ridiculous. But you have no idea how many people will believe things that are presented as news. Many funny things." Clinton said in September 2019 that, "Many funny things including Russian interference helped Trump win." Read more. Let's block ads. Why?